70,000 years ago, you were standing on a beach. Not you specifically, but your ancestors. The people whose blood is still pumping through your veins right now. Behind them, a dying world. Rivers that had turned to dust. Forests that had burned to ash. Animals that had vanished, hunted into silence or starved into extinction. Behind them was misery. Behind them was a slow, certain, grinding death. In front of them, nothing. Just water. A horizon so flat and so empty that it felt like staring into the mouth of eternity. No land. No smoke on the horizon. No birds circling. Just blue nothing. And yet, some of them chose the water. Not the smart ones. Not the rich ones. Not the ones with a plan. The desperate ones. The ones who figured that drowning was faster than starving. This is the story of how a species that couldn't swim, couldn't navigate, and couldn't build a proper boat conquered the entire planet. Not with technology. Not with maps. Not with luck. With something far more terrifying and far more beautiful. They had audacity. To understand why they left, you have to understand what they were running from. Around 74,000 years ago, Mount Toba, a supervolcano in what is now Sumatra, erupted. It was the largest volcanic event in the last 2 million years. It spewed so much ash into the atmosphere that the sun dimmed for years. Temperatures plummeted. A volcanic winter gripped the planet. The ice ages that followed lasted 1,000 years. The world that humans had known, the warm, stable, abundant world, vanished. The animals died. The plants died. And when those died, the humans who depended on them starved. The global human population dropped to perhaps a few thousand individuals. We were on the absolute brink of extinction. At that moment, staying was a guarantee of death. Leaving was a gamble. But humans had one thing that other animals didn't. We could imagine a better place. We could hope. And hope, combined with hunger, is an unstoppable force. So we walked. Generation after generation, we walked. We followed the rivers. We followed the herds. We followed the seasons. Within 60,000 years, a geological blink, we had reached every continent on Earth. We walked across the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia to Alaska. We walked through the Middle East into Europe. We walked along the coasts of Asia. But then we hit a wall. The Wallace Line. A deep water trench that separates the Asian continental shelf from the Australian shelf. Animals couldn't cross it. Even with the lowered sea levels of the Ice Age, this was open ocean, miles of it. Deep, cold, shark-filled, current-whipped ocean. To get to Australia, to reach the new world of giant marsupials and untouched resources, they had to cross open water. No land in sight. No return ticket. No rescue. And they did it anyway. So how? How do you cross an ocean without a compass, without a map, without a motor, without even a sail? First, they watched. They were master observers. They watched birds, frigate birds and boobies, fly out to sea at dawn and return at dusk. Those birds needed land at night. If the birds flew in a certain direction in the morning, land was that way. They watched clouds. Clouds form over islands. They can be seen from 50 miles away. They also watched the color of the water. Shallower water is lighter, greener. They watched the swell of the waves. Waves bend around islands, creating patterns. And at night, they used the stars. Not for navigation as we think of it. They didn't have degrees or coordinates, but they knew the constellations. They knew which stars never moved. They knew the Southern Cross and the North Star. They used them as landmarks in the sky. But observation wasn't enough. They had to build. The first rafts were probably accidental, logs washed out to sea. Then someone figured out how to lash them together. Then someone figured out that you could use a pole to push against the seafloor in shallow water. Then someone figured out that a leaf or a woven mat could catch the wind. But here's the ugly truth. They failed. A lot. They built terrible rafts. They died by the hundreds. They drowned. They were eaten. They died of thirst. We don't dig up those bones. They're at the bottom of the ocean. We only find the bones of the survivors. That's survivor bias. We look at human history and see success. We forget the mountains of failure it took to get there. For every raft that reached Australia, 10 sank. For every island settled, 20 people died trying to find it. You didn't have to be a genius. You just had to be slightly better than the person who drowned yesterday. You just had to learn from their mistake. Evolution doesn't reward perfection. It rewards good enough. And good enough was a lousy raft, a full water skin, and a death wish. But why? Why not just stay on the coast? Why risk everything for an island you can't even see? The answer isn't just survival. It's psychology. These people were imagining. They saw a cloud on the horizon, not a cloud, but an island. And on that island, they saw food. They saw safety. They saw resources. The human brain is uniquely capable of imagining a better future. And that imagining, that what if, is what pulled us out of Africa and across the planet. But it wasn't just imagination. It was storytelling. These explorers didn't go alone. They went with families, with groups. They shared knowledge. They told their children, there is land out there. My father saw it. His father saw it. And one day, we will reach it. That transmission of knowledge across generations is what separates us from every other animal. A monkey can watch its mother crack a nut, but a human can hear a story about a land their great-grandfather almost reached, and they can finish the journey. This is intergenerational audacity. You didn't have to see the island. You just had to believe your father wasn't lying, and you had to want to prove him right. That same psychology, the ability to imagine, the willingness to share stories, the stubborn refusal to accept limits, is what took us to the moon. It's what will take us to Mars. We are the descendants of people who looked at the horizon and said, I bet there's something better over there. And then land. After days or weeks of drifting. After storms. After hunger. After the fear of dying alone in the middle of nowhere. They stepped onto untouched land. No predators. No competition. Abundant food. Fresh water. They had crossed the impossible. They had beaten the ocean. They didn't wait for the perfect boat. They didn't wait for perfect weather. They didn't wait for permission. They just kept walking until the walking ran out. And then they started swimming toward whatever came next. Think about that. If your ancestors had stood on that beach and turned back, if they had decided that the risk wasn't worth it, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be watching this video. Your entire lineage would have ended in a cave somewhere, staring at a wall, waiting to die. You are the descendant of the people who didn't give up. You are the child of the people who looked at death and said, not today. You have the blood of explorers in your veins. Not astronauts. Not generals. Just hungry, scared, desperate people who refuse to stay still. So I'll ask you, what's your ocean? What's the thing you're afraid to cross? The job you're afraid to quit? The city you're afraid to move to? The conversation you're afraid to have? The dream you're afraid to chase? You don't have maps. You don't have a compass. But you have something they didn't. You have their example. You have 70,000 years of ancestors who prove that audacity works. That risk works. That maybe beats definitely not every single time. They didn't wait for the perfect moment. They made the moment perfect by taking a risk. Don't you dare be the generation that stops walking. Don't you dare be the generation that looks at the horizon and says, it's too far. Drop a wave emoji in the comments. Tell me, what are you crossing? What's the big, scary change you're about to make? I'll read them. I'll respond. And I'll see you on the other side. We go.